Here's a question nobody's giving you a straight answer on. Is what's happening between Iran and the West just a headline that fades in 2 weeks, or is it the beginning of something that quietly drains your wallet for the next 12 months? I'm going to give you the honest answer, and it starts with one word: Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman. It doesn't look like much on a map, but roughly 1/5 of the world's oil, gas products, and LNG moves through it every single day. 1/5. That's not a small number. That's the number that moves markets, moves prices, and eventually moves what you pay for groceries, flights, and heating your home. So when that strip of water becomes a war zone, every trader, every CFO, every central banker on Earth starts doing the same mental math. Let me break down the 3 ways the next 12 months could play out and what each one means for your money. Path 1. Things cool down. Tensions ease, shipping stabilizes, the fear premium that got baked into oil prices starts bleeding out. Goldman Sachs has pointed out that geopolitical oil spikes can be surprisingly short-lived when markets believe actual supply disruption will stay limited. Not zero pain. Prices don't snap back overnight, but the shock stays temporary. Markets stop asking how bad can this get and start asking how fast does this normalize. If this is the path we're on, you're looking at a rough quarter, maybe 2, and then life starts feeling normal again. Path 2, a long, grinding standoff. This one's harder to see, but more dangerous to your everyday finances. Not because every tanker stops moving, but because uncertainty itself becomes a tax on everything. When shipping stays irregular, when markets keep bracing for the next escalation, oil doesn't need to spike to $150 to cause damage. It just needs to stay elevated with a conflict premium baked in. And we already saw how fast that can happen. Oil surged sharply during the March escalation, then slid back when Trump suggested the U.S. would end its conflict with Iran soon. That whiplash, that's the new normal in a standoff. And here's the thing about elevated oil that most people don't connect. It doesn't just hit the fuel pump, it seeps through. Freight costs go up, flights go up, delivery costs, factory costs, food packaging, distribution. All of it gets a little more expensive, a little at a time. That's how a war headline quietly becomes a cost of living problem, not in one dramatic moment, step by step. Path 3, a real supply choke. This is the scenario markets are most afraid of. Goldman Sachs warned through Reuters that if Hormuz flows don't recover, oil could surge past $100 a barrel. But here's what most coverage misses. It's not just oil that flows through Hormuz. A massive share of the world's LNG, liquefied natural gas, moves through that same choke point. So a serious disruption doesn't just hit your car. It hits electricity costs. It hits industrial production. It hits business confidence. Reuters specifically flagged Asia and Europe as especially exposed to LNG disruption tied to this conflict. At that point, this isn't a commodity story anymore. It's a full economic story. Now here's the finance angle most people completely overlook. Over the next year, markets may not even need an actual supply cut to change behavior. Just the idea that a major global energy artery has become unreliable, that alone changes things. Companies hedge more aggressively. Traders demand bigger risk premiums. Consumers get cautious when fuel and essentials feel unpredictable. All of that costs money even in calm weeks. So what are the 4 things worth watching over the next 12 months? First, energy prices will likely stay more volatile than anyone was expecting before this conflict. Oil has already shown it can swing hard on a single White House statement. Second, sectors that depend on fuel and transport may stay under pressure longer than energy producers. Airlines, logistics companies, thin-margin businesses, these don't thrive in unstable energy environments. Third, food and household essentials could face second-round pressure. Energy sits underneath fertilizer, transport, processing, and packaging.
When energy gets expensive, eventually so does everything downstream. Fourth, markets will stay unusually headline-driven. One Reuters report, one Trump statement, one military move near the strait, and prices lurch. That's not going away anytime soon. Here's the bottom line. This war matters to your finances not because of the tanks or the missiles. It matters because of the water between Iran and Oman and whether the world still trusts that water to stay open. If it stabilizes, the next 12 months look like a temporary scare that fades. If it stays fragile, you're looking at more volatility, more inflation pressure, and more strain on household budgets. Slow, steady, and hard to point to. The real question isn't what happens in the war. The real question is what happens to energy confidence. Because when energy confidence breaks, prices don't need to explode to change how you live, spend, and save. They just need to stay uncertain long enough to get inside your head. And that's what makes the next year feel very different from the last one.